Well, for Canadians, there's not much doubt that the most important part of the new Trump administration is the decision that he finally settles on with respect to tariffs on goods shipped from Canada into the United States. Yesterday, as has now been widely reported in response to a question from a journalist in the Oval Office, Trump said that his administration is considering 25% tariffs on Canadian goods as of February the 1st, and also called Canada a bad actor in terms of the control of the border, the passage of illegal migrants and drugs southbound into the United States. We're joined now by Scott Crockatt. He's Vice President of Communications and External Relations at the Business Council of Alberta. Scott, thanks a lot for joining us. How do Alberta businesses think about this situation right now?
Well, Paul, thanks for having me on today. I think yesterday what we saw was the Canadian economy dodged a bullet and then realized very quickly that maybe that was closer to a stay of execution with the announcement by President Trump that the tariffs may be coming on as soon as February 1st. I think the way that Canadian businesses are looking at this is that we don't know necessarily when we're going to see the tariffs, but we do know whether we're going to see the tariffs. And the answer to that is yes. From an Alberta business perspective, this is really all about energy. Energy is the biggest portion of our trade with the United States, and Alberta and Western Canada are the biggest suppliers of that energy. So all eyes are kind of focused on between now and whether it's February 1st or April 1st when there are some reports due, or whatever day there is in the future, how can we best protect this, the world's largest trade relationship, depending on the year when you look at it, and particularly the energy side of that, from these really aggressive tariffs that would just be crippling for the Canadian economy.
Alberta's status as a huge exporter of oil to the U.S. makes it unique within the Canadian story. How do you think this should be handled by the federal government of Canada?
Well, I think there's really three things that we need to be thinking about. The events in the last few days and few weeks need to be really a wake-up call to the Canadian economy, Canadian business people, and Canadian policymakers. And first is that we just need to really understand that free trade has been enormously beneficial on both sides of the border. We need to continue making that case to our American friends, and we need to address some of those trade irritants that you brought up, things like defense spending, drugs, and securing the border, things that are in our best interest anyways. The second thing is we need to not do anything that's going to shoot ourselves in the foot, either in the short run or the long run, in terms of what our response needs to be. It's likely we're going to need to have some kind of a response from Canada when the tariffs do actually come into place. But we need to make sure, for instance, that that doesn't encourage the Americans to pursue other avenues for supply really long term. And then the third thing we need to do is we need to do a lot better at home. We're in this position right now where we're so vulnerable to United States trade policy, mostly because of decisions that we as Canadians have made, that we haven't got enough trade infrastructure built to get, in particular, our oil and natural gas to other international markets. And we're nearly solely dependent on this one customer.
That is a long-term project. A lot gets made of that. The lack of pipelines, absent one, the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion that's capable of taking Canadian oil to ultimately to non-U.S. markets. How much of a difference has that pipeline made?
The Trans Mountain expansion, or TMX, has been absolutely a game changer for the energy industry in Canada. It's been an overwhelmingly net positive, but it can only handle a small portion of the overall oil production that Canada produces, and we send several times more production than that to the United States every single day, millions and millions of barrels. Trans Mountain can only fit about 750,000 barrels at its absolute top capacity. So it's a help, it's an answer, but boy, could we use a Northern Gateway and an Energy East pipeline right now. I think we'd be having a very, very different conversation with the Americans and with our own economy.
Do you think there's any realistic prospects of reigniting constructive conversation about those two pipeline projects, let's say if there's a change in federal government sometime in 2025 here in Canada?
I can tell you, Paul, I talk to energy companies all the time who tell me that there is still big interest in, capacity and interest in building more pipelines in Canada. It's not actually even an either or, interest in expanding our energy relationship with the states and getting our products to international markets. I think we do need to see some different federal policy, in particular, a championing of the resource industry. We need to make it much, much easier to build major projects in this country before anyone's going to be very interested. interested in that, but the interest is out there. And you're right, it's a long-term project, but the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time